Breathe.
Trudeau and Poilievre went head-to-head in question period today, and the big question on everyone's mind is, why does nobody support his holiday GST plan?
Let's take a look.
Face an unprecedented threat from President Trump's potential tariffs. And what is the state of things here in Canada? Our economy is weakened. Our borders are weakened. Our military is weakened. And most of all, our Prime Minister is weakened. Why can't we have a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose a leader with the brains and backbone to protect our economy and put Canada first?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition focuses on himself and on me, we're staying focused on Canadians. We're investing in the kinds of things that are going to help people. We stood up for dental care. We stood up to deliver a school foods program. We're moving forward with more spaces of $10 a day childcare, all things that the Conservative Party voted against. But most recently, Mr. Speaker, they've announced they're going to be voting against the GST break for Canadians over the next couple of months. Something that's going to help people at a time where they need that little extra help. But he doesn't care about helping Canadians. He just wants them to suffer more. So maybe he has a chance.
Suffer more? You're increasing the carbon tax on literally everything on April. And this GST break ends right after Valentine's Day. So, dude, what are you talking about?
Well, that's if they're even going to be able to put it in. They're going to be debating it pretty much right after question period.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, because the NDP are still really upset with them about this not extending to seniors and people with disabilities.
Right. It sounds like they've given conditional support if they actually put in the, the rest of the stuff that they, that they're demanding. So,
or maybe the NDP will just give them their support anyways, because I mean, that's what they've been doing this whole time. We want X, Y, Z. Okay, well, you can have half of X. All right, good.
Well, and here's the other thing. Here's potentially what's happening. So if an election doesn't happen before January, which it's unlikely that it will, then sure, you're getting your GST break, but the 25% tariffs, if they don't do anything, and if it actually comes to pass, that gets put on every single Canadian good that is exported from Canada and gets imported to the United States. That is going to be disastrous for the Canadian economy. Why? Because American businesses and Americans in general aren't going to want to pay 25% more for products that they could possibly get in the United States or from other countries.
But not only that, our domestic carbon tax is already increasing the price of those goods. So with or without a tariff, I mean, they're higher than they should be, and the United States may be able to produce them and therefore sell them for cheaper.
Right. And the carbon tax going up on everything in April, well, guess what? That increases the price even more.
Right, makes it worse.
So he's sitting there saying, well, the Conservatives would like to let everybody suffer. You've been letting Canadians suffer for the last 10 years. Look what you've done to this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's lost control of our borders. He's lost control of immigration. He's lost control of spending. That's right. And with that erratic performance, we now see that he's lost control of himself. No wonder foreign leaders believe they can walk all over him. They see him as a weak, incompetent leader who does not even have the support of his own party. Yes. Why won't he put the country first for a change, allow a carbon tax election so Canadians can have a prime minister who will protect this country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You can tell he stood up all night against the mirror trying to practice that line. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we've got our sleeves rolled up. We are fighting for Canadians every single day. We will stand up for good Canadian jobs. We will make sure we continue to have great relations with the United States as we build a stronger future on both sides of the border. We're going to continue to deliver the kinds of things that matter for Canadians. Dental care, free insulin, school food programs, all programs the Conservatives voted against, and now they're going to vote against a GST break for Canadians right across the country for the next few months. That's not being there for Canadians, that's being there for himself.
So the estimated savings on this GST break is between $100 and $200.
Yeah, so if you live in a province that has only 5% GST, then you'll be saving $100 if you spend $2,000 over that 2-month period. And that's only on those select items. If you live in a province like Ontario that has HST, here in Ontario, the HST is 13%. So we would be saving $260 on that same amount if we were to spend on those selected items.
And here's the thing. The provinces haven't all said that they agree with this.
Right.
So any province that has HST, they're not going to be wanting to necessarily give that up. Like Prince Edward Island, they don't get a lot of revenue from their province as it is. And they're like, okay, so now you want us to give up the provincial sales tax? What the heck? So they still have to agree on this. And even the CBC is saying, oh, a GST thing, break is coming. It hasn't even been passed yet. Like, up until this morning, it doesn't even have a bill number yet because it hasn't been tabled. That's supposed to happen, allegedly, this afternoon. But the NDP, they have to actually agree to adjourn the question of privilege debate in order for this to even be debated. And nobody knows if that's happening yet. So, again, all of this is just so up in the air. And it's funny because Trudeau talks about, well, Pierre doesn't put Canada first. How many billions of dollars have you sent to every other country on the planet? Meanwhile, Canadians are starving and living in tents. That's not Canada first to me, and it's not Canada first to Canadians.
Just to prove how weak and out of control he's become, he just engaged in a mass hallucination, listing off a bunch of programs that actually don't even exist outside of his own head. But if he's not prepared to stand up for the country when it comes to trade, then why don't we have a real election about taxes? He can run on his tiny 2-month tax trick, and I'll run on my common sense plan to axe the tax and axe the sales tax on new homes. How about a carbon tax election now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We saw it perfectly clearly just now, the fact that he is trying to gaslight Canadians. He just said that the dental care program, to pick one, doesn't even exist. Well, tell that to the 1 million plus Canadians who've gone to see the dentist, many for the first time in years, because of the Canada Dental Care benefit. This is what he's standing against. He's trying to convince Canadians that everything's broken while he forces his MPs to vote against a GST break that's going to help Canadians over the coming months. That's not leadership. That's pandering to the lowest common denominator.
Okay, so Trudeau wants to talk about pandering. That's literally what this GST bill is.
100%.
A, you're pandering to the NDP, and B, you're trying to buy votes. Votes. Like, if you're so, committed to this, why aren't these $250 checks going out now? Why not? Oh, wait, what's probably going to happen near April of next year? Oh, right, it's there's an election probably going to be happening. So, like this guy. Now, the one thing I will, say on what Pierre said, he can't say the dental program doesn't exist, because it does. He can't say that the childcare program doesn't exist, because it does. What he can say is these programs are completely broken. And yeah, 1 million Canadians may have visited the dentist. I would even question that. But the people that have were oh so surprised when they actually got the bill when they went to check out, because they were told this was going to be free dental care.
Which it's not, and we've covered that previously in our videos. Now, in regards to the GST/HST break on groceries and select items, I went digging. So I took my son to the grocery store yesterday on the way home from his swimming lessons because we just needed a few things for dinner, grab him a few things for lunch during the week. The total bill came to $84.98. So this wasn't a full grocery shop. This was just kind of like a mini shop to get us through the rest of the week. And I paid, let me see, $2.27 in HST at 13%.
Wow.
Yep. Now, of my bill, most of it was non-taxable items. We bought a few things of cheese. We bought some produce for the week. We bought some burger buns. So most of that's not taxable. What was taxable out of my total grocery shop was about $17.47. And that was taxed at 13% HST for that $2.27 value. So again, almost $100 in groceries. And what did I save? Just over $2.
Who's pandering?
Mr. Speaker, Canadians who are struggling are those who will not receive a rebate check. You know who is struggling, Mr. Speaker? The Liberals themselves. The Conservatives don't seem to support the proposal. The NDP neither. The Bloc Québécois neither. No one in this House seems to support the rebate check. If the Prime Minister is so sure of himself, why doesn't he make it a matter of confidence and have a confidence vote?
Amazing. Even the Conservatives are giving them a standing ovation.
Yeah, you see Pierre's looking behind like...
He was like, yeah.
It was a great...
Awesome.
That was phenomenal.
Because that's what it should be. And you know what? I think that's what it is going to be because it's a supply vote, is it not?
I thought so. I thought anything to do with business of supply, unless they're somehow going to be making it not business of supply, because this isn't in the budget. So... they would have to make this a confidence vote, I believe.
One would think, because again, it's a supply vote. It has to do with money.
So,
unless, here's maybe what I'm thinking, because they're taking the HST/GST off. Perhaps that's not a supply bill, but the supply part of it would be issuing the checks in April, which maybe they're planning on putting in the spring economic statement or the budget.
Yeah, that's possibly true. They may be separating these out, because if you are taking tax off, you may not need to make it a supply vote because you're not spending money. That's technically revenue. So
you're losing revenue. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how they split this.
It's clear, Mr. Speaker, that opposition parties want a political excuse to vote against something that Canadians do want. Canadians need a tax break.
Not according to our polls.
Canadians would rather pay $250 out of their own pocket to force an election than to have this tax rebate.
Then that's over now 17,000 Canadians that have voted on our poll. So
now, you could argue that our poll is biased because A, it's online. Online polls are not typically considered representative of the total population. And also that anybody on Northern Perspective is probably leaning a little bit to the right. But still, 17,000 people.
Yeah, and if the NDP and the Bloc, let's just for stupid numbers' sake say that all their supporters agree with them, so that's about 9% on the Bloc, and polls according to Main Street polls are down to 17 for the NDP. That's 66% of Canadians don't want this. So I'm pretty sure we can say overall Canadians do not want this.
Like most Canadians, seniors are doing what they can to get by, but things are tough. The Liberals have let people down, watching as seniors struggle to even buy their groceries. The Liberals' latest disappointment, cutting seniors out of their $250 rebate. Meanwhile, the Conservatives rub elbows with the same grocery CEOs who are jacking up costs. Will the Prime Minister listen and give seniors a much-needed break? I mean, come on, even his own MPs are asking for him to fix this.
Yeah, fix it!
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I remember when the party of Tommy Douglas, of Ed Broadbent, of Jack Layton was actually a party that stood up for workers. But now that we have a government that is recognizing that workers carried us through this pandemic, the Canadian workers saw us through one of the worst global inflation crises the world has ever seen, and that we want to give them support because we know things are tough for workers, not to take away anything from the help we're giving seniors or youth. We want to be there for workers, and the NDP is suddenly against benefits for workers. It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker.
That's like Trudeau saying the NDP used to be there for all workers, like truckers, but we're there for truckers. I'm pretty sure every trucker in this country would not share that sentiment.
Right.
So this is frankly just hilarious, because I think Trudeau thought he had some sort of checkmate going on, and everyone's ticked at him now, even his own party. So yeah, this is going to be quite fun to see this clown show unfold.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No sense, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't agree more. Here we have the NDP claiming to have torn up their deal, their carbon tax coalition, with the Prime Minister. But then they taped it back together when he promised a 2-month tax trick. Then, after taking credit for it, the NDP says they didn't know what was in it. Right. And now they're opposed to it. Mr. Speaker, these two leaders can't even figure out how to give away $6 billion properly. Isn't it time for a carbon tax election so that we can elect a common sense government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, MPs are supposed to represent their constituents here in Ottawa, but the Conservative Party MPs are choosing to represent their leader back in their constituency. I know Canadians across the country, including in Conservative ridings, are looking forward to paying no taxes on meals in restaurants or on all groceries or on kids' clothes for the next few months.
Okay.
All groceries.
Now he's talking about all the folks that voted in our poll. And we can definitely hold that up and say, wrong again.
Well, I can even prove, just based on the receipt that I showed earlier, that it's not all groceries, because most groceries are already tax exempt.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians are ready to stand up and speak for themselves. If the Prime Minister wants to lecture us about democracy, then why don't we have a referendum? A referendum election where the choice will be the following. A tiny 2-month tax trick with the NDP Liberals, or a permanent axing of the carbon tax and axing the sales tax on new homes. Why not let Canadians decide now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, for the Leader of the Opposition to end the price on pollution would mean to end the Canada carbon rebate that comes to people's homes 4 times a year and delivers more money to middle-class Canadians than the price on pollution actually costs, while at the same time decreasing emissions. And in regards to housing, his failed housing proposal was to cut billions of dollars from cities across this country that they're investing in building housing. That would drive up property taxes for homeowners. That would make it harder to build homes. He has a proposal that is electorally interesting for him, but won't do anything for Canadians.
Won't do anything for Canadians. It's going to decrease new housing prices by about 13% in Ontario, and whatever sales tax on any other province. It's going to decrease the price of food by around, I don't know, 36%, 37%, something like that. And as far as the rest of what he said, it's just okay, fine. We've already debunked this from the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report. 60% of Canadians are worse off because of the carbon tax. We already have that. The link is in the description, so there you go. And Sean Fraser, which I saw him, to the left of the frame of Justin Trudeau, seemed to be getting a little uncomfortable because Justin Trudeau was sitting there saying, oh, this investment is given it to all these municipalities and they're investing, in more housing with it. And despite the fact that Sean Fraser said, this does not contribute to building more houses. So what is it contributing to? Oh, right. Bureaucracy.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has run a groundbreaking experiment. He's put billions of dollars in a sack and offered it to politicians, and the finding? They're willing to accept the money. Incredible. A groundbreaking sociological study. He wants to give more money to local politicians who block home building. We want to use the same money to cut taxes for the people who buy homes and build homes. Why won't we allow Canadians to decide whether they want the money to go to the politicians or to the people in a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, at least the Conservative leader is true to form in that he would rather pick fights with everyone than actually deliver for Canadians. We know, as we saw during the pandemic, as we've seen through the inflation challenges, working together with the provinces, working together with municipalities to get things built for Canadians is what they want. What does the Leader of the Opposition do? He insults people, but then he also votes against direct money in Canadians' pockets, whether it's with investments in childcare or dental care, whether it's investments in taking the tax off of groceries for the next few months. These are things that he's standing against out of political self-interest.
So Pierre Poilievre isn't voting against money in Canadians' pockets. He's actually voting for keeping money in Canadians' pockets in the first place. Trudeau and his cronies are taking the money out of your pocket and then bribing you with just a little bit of it, maybe just enough to try to get your vote. That's wrong.
Just shows how out of control he's become. He can't stay on a subject. He brings up housing, so I agree. I just threw away my script and said, let's debate housing. So he now changes the subject back to his 2-month tax trick. Well, here's the trick, everyone. After the tax break runs out in February, they're going to hike the carbon tax on heat, housing, gas, and groceries, all as a part of a plan to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. So will he get himself under control, show some strength for a change, and call a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, every day I get up in this House, I talk about one thing and one thing only, Canadians, and how we're there to help Canadians, how we're there to grow a stronger economy for Canadians, with direct investments that will support them, with free insulin, with dental care, with more spaces in childcare, all things that the Leader of the Opposition is voting against. Yes, we're investing in the most ambitious housing solution that this country has ever seen, things that he didn't do when he was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister. We're going to continue to stand up and fight for Canadians while the Leader of Opposition gets up, pulls off his little performances, and fights against me.
No, you don't. You talk about Ukraine all the time. And some of your caucus members were standing up right before question period during the statements to members and talking about how Palestine needs to be its own state.
Right. And you want to give money to essentially every other country but Canada.
Right. You guys put Canadians last.
100%. And, it's funny because Trudeau talks about the fact that, well, at least Pierre's consistent and he wants to pick fights with people. Well, guess what? You pick fights with people when you need to pick fights with people.
Right. And right now, Pierre Poilievre's job is the Leader of the Opposition. He has to oppose what the government is doing, especially when it's not in Canadians' best interest, which this tax break / refund absolutely is not. It's going to cost us over $6 billion to get this done. The Bloc were asking for half of that with their bill to increase support to OAS recipients from age 65 to 75. So that was too expensive, but this is just fine. Why is that?
Well, and let me just correct Trudeau on one thing. he gets up every day and comes into this house every day and, all he thinks about is Canadians? No. I think all you're thinking about is all of the information that you don't want to end up in the hands of the RCMP because you won't hand over the documents.
Right.
He said he was going to talk about one thing, and then he rambled on about 10 or 15 things, all things he hallucinates that one day he might do if only he were given another 9 years in office, Mr. Speaker. Instead of talking about his real record, which is that he doubled housing costs, he doubled food bank use, he doubled the debt, and now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Mr. Speaker, we need a prime minister who's in control of himself. So why doesn't he call a carbon tax election so we can get one?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll say it again. The Canada carbon rebate puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians. But the leader opposite wants to talk about one thing. He talked about food banks. Let's talk about the school food program. This is a program that sends federal dollars directly into school boards, directly to support delivering good food programs for kids.
Yeah, let's talk about the school food program. The one that actually doesn't have any funding, the one that doesn't send any money to any schools in any provinces right now, and one that says that the government gets to decide what your kids eat, and they haven't even decided that yet. Let's talk about that.
Well, and let's talk about many elementary schools don't have cafeterias, so what are they going to have to do? They're going to have their food brought in by a caterer.
Which means it's probably going to be pre-processed crap.
Our borders, if we're going to protect our economy from President Trump's tariff threats, the Americans and the premiers are all concerned the Prime Minister is too weak to do that. And the data from his own immigration department confirm that fact. According to documents produced by his ministry, there are between 20,000 and 500,000 people in Canada that are not supposed to be here. And there are another 3 million that have to leave within the next year. What is the plan to ensure that people who should leave do leave?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every year there are visitor visas and work permits and student visas that expire, and every year the vast majority of those people return home to their countries. We have procedures and processes in place to make sure that does happen. We have consequences if they don't. We will continue to strengthen those. But continuing to talk down our country, continue to talk down our systems is something that the Leader of the Opposition is doing because he's more focused on trying to get elected than he is on actually solving the problems Canadians are facing. That's why we continue to step up and deliver on the needs of Canadians.
Trudeau just released a video on X as well as YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, very recently about immigration in this country. And one of the claims that he made was that, well, we may see some students now making refugee claims in order to stay in the country, but don't worry, we're going to deal with that appropriately. Here's an article from the Globe and Mail, and the opening paragraph states, Canada is facing a massive and growing backlog of refugee claims. Cases that need to be processed have reached 250,000, triple the number in 2019. This backlog would take almost 3 years to clear if no new cases were accepted. So yeah, maybe people who are abusing our refugee system will be sent home, but it's going to take over 3 years to get to that point. And that's if no new cases are added. If we start getting cases added at an unprecedented rate, that time frame is going to go up.
And we're supposed to be expecting a whole bunch of more people coming up north very soon.
Well, and allegedly, we're supposed to be expecting more students taking out refugee claims. So I don't think this is going to be resolved quickly.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Another weak answer from a weak leader, Mr. Speaker. The reality is he says that people just voluntarily leave when their permits and visas are up. But his minister admitted this week that that is impossible to prove because they don't keep track. And The closest thing they could get to an answer was their department saying estimates from academic sources range from between 20,000 and 500,000 persons, although there may be more. We're talking about people who should not be in our country. So once again, what is the plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, once again, we laid out an immigration plan just a few weeks ago that talks about how we're going to make sure that our immigration numbers allow for our economy to catch up, for our home building.
Okay, so Pierre's asking for the plan to ensure that the people who should be leaving are leaving. And what you're saying is, oh, well, we have a plan to reduce the number of people that are coming into the country.
I mean, that's important, but it's only half of the issue.
It's not the same thing.
Right.
But this is the problem with Justin Trudeau. He never has a plan. His plan is, what am I going to do in the next 24 hours in Canada?
Justin Trudeau's plan seems to be, what can I say that requires very minimal effort that will get Canadians to see me favorably and vote for me again?
Yeah, because the Liberals don't have any ideas. The only things that they've really even done are things that the NDP has forced them to do as part of their supply and confidence agreement. Like, what does that say?
I know the Prime Minister said that he'll leave the economy to bankers. Well, the bankers are sure rolling in cash, collecting interest on the national debt that he has already doubled, while Canadians line up at food banks. Right. The question, though, was about the size of the deficit. You cannot run a $500 billion G7 government if you don't know anything about the finances of that government. So can the Prime Minister tell us, does he actually know the size of the deficit?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are focused on is delivering for Canadians, is being there to recognize that Canadians need support now as we build a stronger future for them. That's why we're drawing in global investment to a higher rate than just about any other country per capita in the G20. We are delivering things that make a real difference in Canadians' lives, like dental care, like a school food program, like more spaces in childcare at $10 a day, like a tax break for the next 2 months, like direct support for workers. All things, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives are voting against because they care more about themselves than they do about Canadians.
That's right.
There's a saying in business. The higher up you are, the less you're focused on the people management side and more on the finance side. So we used to say, as a manager, you spend 80% of your time managing your people, 20% of your time managing your budget. When you move up to a director role, you should be spending 20% of your time managing your people and 80% of your time managing your budget. If you're the Prime Minister of a G7 country with a $500 billion budget, you better damn well know what you're spending, what you're not spending, what your run rate is, what your deficit is, and how much you're paying in interest. Because remember, that's not just money. That's our money.
Well, my guess is that he knows darn well. He just doesn't want to say it out loud.
100%. And that's why he doesn't want to answer the question. And if you're too embarrassed and too afraid to answer what you're spending in order to deliver for Canadians, then maybe you're doing something wrong.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't know.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't know. No. That's scary.
I was tempted to accuse him of hiding it. But, you know, as Napoleon Bonaparte said, never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence.
Yep.
Mr. Speaker, who's actually running this government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition continues to focus on me, I'm going to stay focused on delivering for Canadians, delivering a tax break for the next few months that will help Canadians with the cost of everything, deliver on supports for workers, deliver on supports for seniors, deliver on supports for youth. These are all things that the Conservative Party votes against. Not because Conservative MPs don't care about these things, but because they've been throttled and muzzled by their leader so that they can't actually be their community's voice in Ottawa. They're there to be their leader's voice in their communities. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
So he's delivering all of these things, but he doesn't know what it costs.
That's like when... I don't even know of a situation that bad, because I was going to say that's like when you give your kid $20 to go into the candy store and he just goes hog wild, but you've given him $20. So this really has no comparison. This is like maybe the rich kid who is put as a secondary on daddy's credit card and just goes hog wild.
To quote Stephen Harper, he has no idea what he's talking about.